You got to wait for a gapper.
That is fair. Down the right field line. Giambi on his way to third. And they're going to wave him around. The throw misses a cutoff man. Shot into the plate. Out of the plate. Derek Jeter with one of the most unbelievable plays you will ever see by a shortstop.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Good morning, good morning. Here we are. They call it for some reason Hump Day. I guess that's because we're getting over the hump for the week. Boy, now there's a deep thought to get our morning started. Gentlemen, good morning. Casey McAllister, Paul Fritzner, the dunce over in the corner, Brandon Seho. How we doing, gentlemen?
Great. How you doing, Tom?
Doing well. Casey, you all right? A little quiet this morning.
No, I'm good. I'm doing good.
I figured you'd have a little bounce in your step. You're getting ready to get the keys to your new place. For those of you that weren't with us yesterday, Casey and his bride-to-be, they've purchased a new home up in the Mason area, much to the chagrin, I might add, of our good friend Tracy Jones, who once lived in Mason, as he told us yesterday. Yep. You're getting the keys on Monday. I think you'd have a little more pep in your step today.
No, I'm excited for the house. I'm excited for the opportunity to be a homeowner. I'm just going through the motions. It's just – it feels like it's dragging. Like I just want it to be here.
Yeah.
I just want it to be here. I'm excited. It's just the anticipation is killing me.
Let me ask you, is this the first home or condo or whatever you've ever bought?
No. Well, this is the first
This is
thing
a
I've
yes
owned.
or no question,
This is the
Casey.
first thing I've owned. I've rented for a while.
So that's what I'm saying. It's your first thing to own.
Yeah, first thing.
Because I think that, and I try to share this with young people all the time. I'm curious. I have a question for you before I make my point. You pointed out yesterday that your bride-to-be makes a good living. She makes good cash, whole 9 yards. But are you a little nervous when you think about having a monthly mortgage payment? It's one thing to have a rent payment. Are you a little nervous about a mortgage payment?
A little bit.
Not terribly.
Not terribly. I feel comfortable with where we're at financially to be able to cover that.
Okay.
But it is just like a bigger responsibility because you own it. It's yours to take care of. If something happens, it's on you. You can't call the landlord.
That's right.
So, not that I needed to call any landlord before, but, I do think it's a bigger responsibility and something I'm ready to take on the challenge.
All right,
for.
because I have found and I've shared that, I remember like it was yesterday, the first two places I bought, a small little condo out in Anderson 100 years ago, before you guys were born. That's not an exaggeration. And then when I moved up to Eden Park / Mount Adams up there, and you just get scared about making the payment when you know it's a mortgage and, all that kind of thing. And you got to just say, okay, we've done all this due diligence. We're going to be okay, but there's still that feeling in the pit of your stomach because it's now a whole new step in life. So good morning. We're here every day from 10 to noon. You can join us on YouTube / Chatterbox Sports. We've got a great loyal following here, I must say. I'm going to punch it up because it seems like we're starting to get more and more people who are watching. That's a fact. Doesn't seem like it. That's happening. But we have regulars, and I was thinking about this driving in. Whether it's Sir Boy Wonder 513, 6412 Mars, Jake, and there are others who join us all the time. William jumps on board. Alex jumps on board. I just want to sincerely say thank you because we're trying to get this thing going. We're starting from scratch. And we really appreciate you guys being with us. So spread the word. We invite you to subscribe and then hit the notifications button. You can go back and check out all of our clips from different interviews throughout the course of the day and the night. On social media, we can be found on Twitter, on Instagram, and what else? Facebook?
Facebook.
At Thom Brennaman TV. That's Thom Brennaman TV is in television. Many of you, many thousands of you, in fact, prefer the podcast route. And that's great. Just search Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman wherever you get your podcast, and hopefully it will be there. Now, the Bengals are back at it today. They're getting ready for Monday night's AFC clash in the AFC North with Cleveland. In Cleveland, Halloween night. I noticed the Bengals open as a 3.5-point favorite. We'll ask Paul about that in a minute. Joe Burrow was named the AFC's Offensive Player of the Week. That is 2 consecutive weeks he has won that award. And with a big game on Halloween, as Casey pointed out, we were talking before the show, if he has another big night on October the 31st in Cleveland, he may well be the Offensive Player of the Month in the AFC. Elsewhere, the Cowboys, trying to shore up one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, acquired Jonathan Hankins from the Raiders yesterday. The 320-pound former Buckeye is in his 10th season in the league since entering as a second-round pick by the Giants back in 2013. In baseball, the Miami Marlins named Skip Schumacher as their new manager yesterday. The former Cardinals bench coach spent 11 seasons as a player in the major leagues. He had about a half year with the Reds. Awesome guy. That is a big task for Schumacher, that being trying to win in Miami. And speaking of baseball, the World Series opens on Friday night. That's in Houston. First 2 games are there. Then you go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3, 4, and 5 in Philly. Should it go any further, it would come back to Houston for games 6 and 7. I'm assuming Justin Verlander will start game 1 for the Astros. And for the Phillies, they have a decision to make. Do they go with Aaron Nola, who going into the year and for most of the year pitched like a number 1, but in the postseason, Zach Wheeler has been the guy. We'll see. No word yet officially who's going to start game 1 for Philadelphia. All right, guys, one thing we were talking about, getting back to Burrow for a minute, winning the Offensive Player of the Week back-to-back weeks. It was pointed out, I think, by Paul Daner Jr. from The Athletic. I want to give him credit for looking this up. It's not us. In the last 24 weeks of play in the National Football League, the Bengals have had a player, now whether that was on offense, whether that was on defense, or whether it was Evan McPherson on special teams, over the last 24 weeks, the Bengals have had 10 different award winners for Player of the Week. Now, that is impressive. That's by far more than any other team in the AFC.
Really? So it's 10 in 24 weeks?
Yeah.
That's really impressive. I have not been keeping track of that at all, but I'm just thinking about it in my mind. Jamar Chase obviously is 1, Joe Burrow, probably Joe Mixon, Money Mac. So there's 4.
I think Higgins is in there somewhere.
Higgins.
I think that I'm pretty sure Von Bell was in there. I'm pretty sure Hendrickson was in there.
Okay.
I'm charging my phone in preparation of this big interview today. Our big interview today, a special day today. We have Marty Brennaman coming in. And it was your idea, Casey.
Yeah.
And I'm charging my phone only because I'm going to have to use my phone. He's coming into the studio today. And you sent me a text last night. You said, hey, look, I'm going to send out on your Twitter account that we're going to take questions that fans might have for Marty Brennaman. And the response has been insane, right?
Right. We've had a lot of good questions, and they're not multiples of the same question. They're all different questions, and there's probably like a good 30 of them that are decent questions, awesome questions to ask. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an awesome segment coming up at 11
o'clock. 11 o'clock straight up. We've got him for an hour. He has a speaking engagement. And look, we've gotten great questions. I was sitting around looking at them last night, looking at a few more this morning, all over the board, all kinds of things, from his relationship with Joe Nuxall to, what's the most underrated city to visit, whether it's a ballpark, all kinds of different things. But I'm going to tell you right now, okay? And we've said this when we've interviewed Dan Horde. We've said this when we interviewed Dave Lapham. and there are others. My dad still draws a paycheck from the Cincinnati Reds. He is basically an ambassador for the team, okay? Whether it's like today up here around Hamilton or Middletown, he has a speaking engagement on behalf of the Reds Community Fund where they go to senior living homes and they talk baseball with fans who love baseball, men and women who have followed the Reds, a lot of them for, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And so I'm not going to get into today with him, just so you know. And a couple of you asked a question, and they are perfectly logical, understandable questions, getting his thoughts on the current state of the Reds ownership and some of the things that happened this year with Reds ownership, whether it was trading away a bunch of players, whether it was everything that happened with Phil Castellini on opening day, all that kind of thing. We're not getting into all that. We're just not going to do it. So, we can talk about the current state of the Reds, where they are as far as their player personnel and that kind of thing is concerned. But do you guys have a question? Because you two are the backbone of this program. And so have either one of you thought of a question for Marty Brennaman today? Or are you just leaving that to those that are watching?
Casey?
Well, honestly, I won't lie. I was going to steal one of the questions from Twitter to ask, but now that we're going to let him just rip it right off of Twitter, just rapid fire them, I'm going to have to come up with one before he comes in.
All right. Okay. Paul, you are a budding future play-by-play star. Have you thought of a question?
I mean, there are just some general things. I was going through the list last night of Twitter questions, and I think a lot of the things that come to mind about broadcasting and the intricacies of it. I saw a couple questions about some of his other sports that he had broadcasted outside of baseball, how he balanced those things. So I know it's a niche type of subject for me with broadcasting, because those are just the things that I get interested in when I hear a guy like Marty, and one of the best baseball broadcasters of all time, and hear what I'd be interested to hear what he liked outside of baseball, because he some people around here in Cincinnati know him just as a baseball guy, but certainly was not just a baseball guy. So I'll be interested to hear a little bit more about his outside of baseball career. We don't have to spend too long on it, but just kind of his perspective.
He loves talking about that.
And
he loves talking about it because there was a time, it was a long time ago. I mean, heck, I remember as a kid, and both of my parents are from Virginia, and we were living in Virginia Beach, and I was, 7, 8, 9, whatever it was, and he was announcing Virginia Tech football. He would announce another year William and Mary football, but then he really got away from football and became primarily a baseball and basketball announcer, going back to the old ABA days of the Virginia Squires. But I'm amazed how many people – it just happened to me the other day. I was sitting somewhere, and most of the people I knew, some I don't know. That might be my dad calling right now. Forgive me, I should have turned that off. Who is that?
Don Paparella.
Oh, okay. All right. That's cars in the shop. Got to get it fixed. Okay. Thank you very much. But those ABA days, and guys your age, you got to be well into your late 50s, early 60s, more like it, to remember much about the ABA. And I'm going to ask him about the book that was written, and he was a part of this book that really chronicled the days of the American Basketball Association. I think 3 or 4 teams wound up folding into the NBA from that league, the Indiana Pacers being one. But some of the players that played in that league and played on the team that he broadcast for, the Virginia Squires, and I was a ball boy for the Virginia Squires, and had the visiting team's locker room every single night. And, guys like, on the Squires, you had Julius Erving, Dr. J. Those were his first 3 or 4 years out of college, played in the ABA for the Squires. George Gervin, another Hall of Famer, became a great NBA star, obviously, as Dr. J did. One of the great names in the history of college basketball, Charlie Scott, was the first African-American player at the University of North Carolina. phenomenal player, both in the ABA and the NBA. But other teams had guys like the Kentucky Colonels, had guys like Dan Issel, Artis Gilmore. I mean, there were guys across that league. Marvin Barnes with the St. Louis Spirits. Bob Costas. That was his first job, announcing for that team in the ABA. So we'll get into a little bit of that. But I was somewhere the other day, and someone had just assumed that our family, because we've been in Cincinnati for so long, going back to 74 when my dad got the Reds, that we were like some Cincinnati family. And nothing could be further from the truth. But when you live somewhere, as my dad has now for 54 years, whatever it is, 53 years, Cincinnati is home. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Paul, I want to ask you about the Bengals.
Sure.
You said the line has changed just in the last 24, 48 hours?
Yeah, it opened at 2.5, and it's up to 3.5 now, which once it gets over that field goal number, the 3 and 7, 3, 6, and 7 are the key numbers in football. For those of you that might be new to betting, 3, 6, and 7 happen almost a third of the time. Those are the numbers that you get over in football. So that's where it opened. The vast majority of the bets right now and the money is all on the Bengals. I think the Bengals are getting all of the attention because of the prevailing public sentiment that the Browns stink and the Bengals are good, which I do believe the Browns stink and I do believe the Bengals are good.
I just can't believe you think the Browns stink, but okay.
I think they stink relative to what we're seeing right now, and there's the Bengals, Joe Burrow hasn't beaten the Browns. Now, granted, they rested their starters last year, so in the second game, they rested their starters. But this is a hill that Joe has to climb. He's got to beat the Browns at some point. You can't keep going winless against a team in your own division, especially a team like the Browns that doesn't have it all going together. They are very injured. But and this is another thing I want to say real quick before we get in too much into the betting thing, is you're starting to see this trending theme around everybody saying, well, the Bengals have played all these backup quarterbacks. All these teams have been – everybody's hurt. It's the NFL. Everybody has injuries. Everybody's hurt. You play the teams that are in front of you. I kind of get sick and tired of hearing all the time about all these players that are hurt on the other team. Or it's just, the Falcons having their secondary hurt as badly as they did last week. And you get to this point in the season where it just becomes a war of attrition, and you just have to play the guys that are in front of you.
Okay, and you're right. There's no doubt there are a lot of guys that get hurt. It's a violent game played by big, strong, fast men. They hit one another with all full force, no doubt. But, dude, you can't dispel the backup quarterback thing. I mean, how many good quarterbacks in the NFL this season have been hurt for an extended period of time? Starting quarterbacks. The three biggest ones, or the two biggest ones, of teams that have had good years so far this year, the Bengals played both of them.
Yeah.
Cowboys and the Jets, right?
Yeah.
Since Wilson has come back, Jets haven't lost, right?
Cooper Rush played well, though.
Cooper Rush played well, but I mean, look, they played some teams with backup guys, and, that's just a fact. It's part of the game. You're right. You can make the argument that maybe there was some big defensive player that didn't play against somebody else, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, the quarterback position is the most important position on the field, and the Bengals have been fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna discount that, but I do sometimes get tired in the NFL of always having to hear about this team played this team and they got lucky because so and so was hurt, and it's like I feel like every time you watch an NFL game, it's just the injury bug. It's some sort of a different title for a graphic to show look at the guys that are hurt for the Bengals, and I'm not saying that Joe Burrow is hurt. Obviously, the Bengals don't have their most important players out like some of these teams have, but I don't know. I look at this Browns team on Monday, and this is a huge game for both teams, because for the Bengals, like we talked about yesterday, to get 2 games over 500 is such a big deal. You put the Browns out of it with a lot. with a Bengals win over the Browns on Monday night, you can really put a nail in the coffin on the Browns. And the Browns aren't a pushover. They run the ball really well. But the other thing that you mentioned yesterday, Tom, they run the ball well when they run it. They got to run the ball to run it well.
Well, I mean, look, that's all the talk shows are going off about and have for quite some time about the Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski. We had Brian Billick on the show on Monday. He called the game, filling in as a radio analyst on the Baltimore broadcast, but he still follows the NFL. He's a big Stefanski guy. But look, I go back to this whole thing when Stefanski was in Minnesota. And I was doing a lot of Vikings games back in those days. A lot. Mike Zimmer was the head coach, okay? Gary Kubiak was brought in, offensive genius, great coach with Denver, all that kind of thing. I think he won a Super Bowl with Denver. Didn't Kubiak win as a head coach, right?
I think so.
I think he did. Anyway, they brought him in to oversee the offense, and Stefanski was put in as offensive coordinator, first-year play caller, all that kind of thing. And so what happened in subsequent years before Stefanski became a head coach in Cleveland was, they got Dalvin Cook. Now, he was in and out of the lineup, hurt a little bit, but a great back when healthy. And they became pass-happy with Kirk Cousins once they brought him in as a free agent. And it used to make Zimmer crazy. We'd be sitting in meetings with him, and he's like, I've told these guys we have got to start running the ball. Well, now fast forward, Stefanski is in Cleveland. I believe he's a play caller for the Browns.
Yeah, and that's
and all they do is throw it with a backup quarterback, who's not a bad quarterback. I don't think Brissett's a bad player. In fact, I think he's probably one of the 3 or 4 best backup quarterbacks in the league. I mean, look, if anything, God forbid, ever happened to Burrow, who would you rather have playing? Jacoby Brissett or Brandon Allen?
Brissett.
I mean, not even close.
Yeah, that's not even a question.
So this guy's not a bad quarterback. And he was 21 of 27 in the game last week. But the knock on them is they don't run it. And if they don't run it 30 to 35 times this week, I will be shocked.
They have to. They have to. And the thing the Browns know is they have to win this game. The Browns have to win this game against the Bengals on Monday to stay afloat. If they want to give Deshaun Watson a chance to have any kind of an impact on this season when he comes back in a few weeks, they have to win this game. There's no two ways about it. You can't come back after week 8 of the NFL season just having 2 wins on the year. You got to win this game against the Bengals at home on Monday Night Football against a Bengals team that has struggled to beat you in the past. You got to win this game if you're Cleveland. And do they have the play calling and the horses to do it? I guess that's what we got to see. Vegas seems to think it's going to be a close game, 3.5 point spread, depending on where you're looking. And I thought it'd be a little higher, but I think the 3, once you get over that field goal, I think that makes sense. Haven't decided what I'm going to do on it yet because I was looking at the weather last night.
Wait a minute. Well, hold on.
It's supposed to be a pretty ugly game.
Wait a minute.
What?
Casey, am I missing something, or have we heard Paul say for the last now 3 days, including this morning already, and our show's not even 25 minutes young, has he not said multiple times the Browns stink?
They stink.
He did.
Well, I meant –
And you mean to tell me you're wrestling around with 3 or 3.5 points you're not sure what you're going to do if you
or taking the
claim
total.
one team stinks?
Or taking the total. Yeah, or taking the total. The Bengals were 5-0 to the under to start the year. Now they've gone over in their last 2 games. Supposed to be a miserable weather game on Monday. I'm looking at the total, looking at the spread. I really like it at 3.
What is the total?
What is the total, Casey?
Yeah, I got it.
It's moved around a little bit. 47? 40, am I reading that right? 47? 47. It's a lot of points.
It is? I mean, is that a high number for the NFL for us who
are
it's completely novices to the gambling world?
No, it's not. It's on. I guess it's on a little bit on the higher side, but it's not a lot. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a 27-20 is a push. I mean, that's a lot of scoring.
Yeah.
And especially if one team wants to, we're thinking one team really wants to run the ball.
Yeah.
So you're chewing up clock. If it's an effective run game, you're chewing up clock. You're keeping the other offense off the field. Our buddy Zim Hude, I mean, the more you listen to this guy, he really knows his stuff. And I thought he made a great point yesterday about other teams being scared of the Bengals and should be more scared of the Bengals, and the Bengals are scared. Nobody's scared, but you know what I'm saying, concerned. Then the Bengals would be about other teams, just based on the star power of that team. I mean, when you really, we're like the forest for the trees on this thing with the Bengals, right? They stunk it up first couple of weeks. Burrow's sacked 13 times. Offensive line starting to play a lot better. They've got stars on that offensive line who are starting to come together. The skill positions are just unbelievable. Why wouldn't you be worried about playing the Cincinnati Bengals if they can keep it rolling here on offense?
Yeah, I mean, they are scary. Straight up. And I wanted to point out a few different things about this game in particular. Denzel Ward is in concussion protocol. He might not play Monday, which would be huge for Jamar Chase. And Wyatt Teller, their starting guard, an all-pro guard, he's questionable. I don't know.
And they have a linebacker that's out for the year.
Yeah.
They just announced that yesterday. Phillips,
yeah.
done for the year. Torn pec.
So I know we talked about how easy these games have been for the Bengals just due to injuries or quarterback play, yada, yada. This is turning into one of those situations where if Denzel Ward and Wyatt Teller don't play this game, they've for sure got to win this game. Those two are all-pro players on the Browns team, and Jamar Chase should have a field day, and we should be able to stop the run without one of their all-pro guards. Something I found a little interesting as well, Jay Tufele, the defensive tackle that we picked up right after cut days, right after preseason, he has been grading out really well. He was one of the best defenders last week. One of the best. Out of everyone in the whole league. Aaron Donald, all those other guys, he graded higher than those guys. And I think that says something that we might have a gem and a guy who might be able to fill in the role that DJ Reader left behind. Let's just look at the Falcons game for an example, right? I just want to briefly go over the numbers with you. The Atlanta rushing attack, which was the best.
Top three in the league.
Top three in the league, only managed 107 yards. Their receiving was only 124. Jay Tufele, not only did he stop the run, he also got pressure. He was getting people in the backfield. He was all over the place. Now, I'm not saying he's a DJ Reader, but with him playing as well as he did against Atlanta, who has been running the ball really well, gives me more confidence that he's going to be a bigger factor, considering how there's not much tape on him, that not a lot of people are going to be focused in on that. They're going to be focused in on DJ Reader not playing. And they're going to think that the middle of the field is going to be wide open against the Bengals when that might not be the case. So I feel really confident in this game after going back yesterday and kind of doing some research on this game. Like, they've got some injuries. They've got the game plan is probably to run the ball on us. That's what they do against us a lot. Play action after that. And I just don't think they're going to be able to do that with Jay Tufele. So.
All right, that's a fair point. One thing we did not get into much yesterday, or actually on Monday, was the additional snaps being given as a fifth defensive back to Cam Taylor-Britt.
Yeah, that's big too.
Eli Apple has been that guy. And look, I know a lot of people, and he brings a lot of it on himself. There's no doubt about it. A lot of people have criticized Apple through the years. You go back to the postseason last year. I think the guy has been a solid player for this team since he got here. Great player, no. But you weren't asking him to be a great player. He's been a good, solid player. But they obviously see something in Taylor-Britt that is warranting him getting more snaps. He's younger, he's faster, probably more physical. I'm not down on Apple. But obviously, Lou Anarumo, this guy knows what he's doing as defensive coordinator. And early in the year, you may remember, there was a lot of talk when they asked Lou about, some of these younger guys getting playing time, and maybe Jesse Bates is not on the field as much after they drafted the safety out of Michigan, and he played great in the preseason. Why wasn't he getting more snaps? And Anarumo said, look, they're the starters and they're the backups, and Bates is going to play. But now all of a sudden, I don't know if you consider Apple a starter. Most teams look at a fifth defensive back in this day and age of throwing the ball around the NFL a lot more than at any time, that guy is a starter for most teams. But what are your thoughts on that young man getting more playing time?
You don't see Lou Anarumo switch out the corners too much. So I think, to your point, I don't have a ton of thoughts on it because we're still a little early into the sample size. But the only thing that I took away from it is that you just don't see Lou Anarumo make these kinds of adjustments all that much in terms of switching players in and out. Yep. He likes his guys. He gets his set rotation, and he doesn't stray from it too much. So to see him get in there, get some snaps, get some experience under his belt going forward, I think that's a step in the right direction. I like it.
Yeah, and I was just looking at Eli Apple's stats, how many times he was targeted, how many receptions he's given up in the season. I mean, it's pretty pedestrian. Last week really killed him in the stat column. I mean, that was the first touchdown he gave up all year.
So, I mean, you can't complain about that.
No, you can't. And so, I am an Eli Apple stan. I actually like the guy a lot. I think he gets a lot of crap that he shouldn't. But so
what was the term you just used that Brandon Seho is claiming because of my age that I don't know what that term means? What did you just say?
A stan.
Stan. So put that in context for me, please.
I just like the guy a lot. I stand by him.
Gotcha.
Stand by
okay.
him.
Okay. Right. I mean, I'm learning all kinds of things from you guys.
I mean,
I don't know how much of it's good. I'm trying.
I did my best to paraphrase it. But anyways, I think, you look at his stat totals. I mean, he's not giving up a ton of yards. Like, the most yards he had given up before that point in a game was 50. 50 yards.
And he's on the field a lot of snaps.
And he's on the field. He's starting on the field.
Yeah, right.
For the majority of the time. So, to me, I think Eli Apple gets a lot of hate when he shouldn't. Before that, he was below I want to say an 85 passer rating. This is like the 158 scale, not the 0 to 100. So he was doing very well.
Better than average.
Yeah, better than average. But I think what's really encouraging is that Cam Taylor-Britt played much better when he did go in. So if we were to get an upgrade at that other corner slot or that corner position, and let's just say Cam Taylor-Britt does play really well, I mean, this defense is really scary then. Like, you got Awuzie, who's super underrated.
Yep. Been the best corner in the league so far this year.
Yes. And if you were to have another guy on the other side that was able to hold his own against number twos and not occasionally give up the pass there, I mean, you're looking at a whole new defense, honestly. Because
go ahead.
Because they are going to target the guys that are – I don't know why this still continues to happen, but they target Awuzie, and when they realize they can't target Awuzie, they go after Apple.
Of course.
So I think if Cam Taylor-Britt is an upgrade over Eli Apple, you do it. You get him in early. You let him play. You start him now. Just get him into the NFL. Get the rookie jitters out, just like they did against the Falcons.
Yep.
And it paid off. He played well.
There's one guy I would like to see. I think the Bengals defense is really good, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about this whole 7 straight games to begin a year without allowing a second-half touchdown, which, as you know, the Bengals have not allowed a second-half touchdown in any of their 7 games this year. Now, some say it goes back 30 years. There are others that are saying it goes back 40, 50 years. And I'm sure that's probably being broken down into, was it 7 games to start a season, as opposed to when's the last time it happened where it was just 7 games in a row at any point in the season. Nonetheless, it's an incredible number. It's an incredible stat and an incredible testimony to that defense. They're playing a lot of close games. They're not giving up the touchdowns in the second half. But for this defense, in my opinion, to have a chance to go from very good to great, they are one really good pass rusher away from being a great defense.
Agreed.
And the guy that allegedly is on the trade block right now, he's not had a great year so far in terms of sacks, but he played great on Monday night. He's had a great career, is Robert Quinn. I'd go get that guy from the Chicago Bears right now. And the Bengals have cap space. They can do all those kinds of things. They have a young team. You know, you look at their team, there's some spots they're going to have to start filling in the next couple of years with draft picks, but I think they always do a good job by and large. Not perfect, but do a good job in draft picks. I would go get Robert Quinn right now. Bring him in on third down. You got Hubbard, you got Hendrickson, and you got Quinn going after the quarterback.
Is Robert Quinn what is his contract situation?
You know what? I don't care what his contract situation is, because the Bengals notoriously, even though they've spent money in recent years, they are always well under the cap. Football, unlike baseball, is not a guaranteed contract league, where if he comes here, if he is on a long-term deal, and you don't want to pick up the option on the contract for next year, you can do it. You'll take a salary hit, cap hit, but it's not going to be anything earth-shattering. But, I mean, you got to admit, Hubbard's played really well. We talked about that the last couple of days. He's played great, better than pretty well. He's played great. Hendrickson has played great. But it seems like they still don't get to the quarterback enough for me.
Yeah.
Paul, Casey, any thoughts on that? You like the idea, Quinn? Am I crazy? You don't like it? What?
Yeah, so this was from Jordan Schultz yesterday, that he said he tweeted this: continue to hear that Bears defensive end Robert Quinn is a trade candidate from several teams. Biggest hurdle right now is Quinn's $18.2 million cap hit for 2023, and so that's what they're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's a big number.
That's
Yeah,
a big number.
That's a big number.
Bengals
So, you know,
won't take
maybe I should have probably looked at that for sure on what that would be. I don't know if that changes at all when you move to another team. I don't know how that works, because a lot of that is built into the signing bonus that you have. How much do you get on that, right?
yeah.
Okay, and we got to get somebody to really explain one day on the show about the whole salary cap thing and how that works, because, you know,
It's a question everyone always has, no matter what. Even if it's explained in other shows, like, it's always a question that needs to be answered.
Get a legal analyst on here, Tom.
Yeah. Let's get, like, the Bengals legal analyst on here. Do we know anyone? Who's
No, you know, I had never met Duke Tobin until I ran into him at a social event this summer. And he was in a completely relaxed state. Training camp had not started yet. I was able to sit around, have a beer with him, shoot the breeze for like an hour. Met him through a friend of a friend, and what a really pleasant guy, and is one of the most underrated, I think. If there is such a thing as a general manager for a team that doesn't have the title general manager, he's it.
Yeah.
Guy's done a hell of a job.
Yeah.
Hell of a job.
Yeah.
And it's not only in your draft picks, and every team's going to have their hits and misses in draft picks, but it's relying on your scouts and your coaches when you're going out to acquire players from other teams. So Awuzie, right? They bring him in from Dallas, right? They bring in Hilton from the Steelers. They bring in Von Bell. They bring in all these guys, Hendrickson. You know, you can say, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, you know, Hendrickson might be a pretty safe bet. Bottom line is he had never been to a Pro Bowl until he got here, and now he's a Pro Bowler. Von Bell's had a great career before he got here, and he's I think the heart and soul of that defense, along with Reeder, as far as a toughness and a tone-setting kind of a player. But look, you got to evaluate guys, and that's part of his job, and he's been really good.
Yeah. I just wanted to also mention that pass rush conversation.
Yes.
DJ Reader being out for the last couple games, I think, has affected that. Before he was the highest graded defensive player before that in the NFL, and he was just getting after it. I mean, he was winning. I think it says here like 20% of his true pass rush rates. Or I'm sorry, he was winning 42. My bad. He was winning 20% of the time without it being a true pass set, and then 42% of the time when it was a true pass set. And to kind of explain what that means is when it's a true passing down, when there's no play action, that they're just hiking the ball
in shotgun.
Right. And he was winning 42% of the time. I don't know if anyone can really fathom that number or to put it in perspective, but Hendrickson only wins 25% of the time in true pass set numbers. So he's almost doubling the amount of time winning. And I get it. It's kind of a small sample size, but I think DJ Reader really was playing on fire this season. He was balling out. When he comes back, that pass rush is going to look a lot different. And with Jay Tufele kind of stepping up, I'm telling you, you get multiple good interior guys in there, and it alleviates some of the pressure that's on Hendrickson and Sam to make a play. The worst pressure is up the middle in the NFL. So,
well, I mean, you saw a team last year in the Rams, and you mentioned the guy who some feels the greatest of all time as far as interior lineman is concerned, in Aaron Donald. I mean, he was the reason why there was so much pressure created in the middle of the offensive line in that Super Bowl last year, and he's been doing it his entire career. You got to have those guys. Geno Atkins did it for so long here with the Bengals. What a great player he was. We never talk about him anymore. But a great player for a long, long time. But you still got to have those guys that can run down a quarterback.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough sledding on Monday without Reader.
Yeah, it will be.
We'll see.
In the rush game.
I'm really thinking I might be putting too much faith in a guy that was cut from a team. But I mean,
you're putting a lot of faith in this guy, Casey. I got to tell you.
I mean
a lot.
I love the positive vibes, Casey.
I just
fire me up.
Mr. Positive. He's Mr. Homer.
Fire me up, Casey. Fire me up.
He's played well in the last 2 weeks. He was one of the top PFF graded defenders.
Now that's another thing that I want to do
one
time, because some of you may have heard the clip after the game, and I think it was Alex Kappa. Was it Kappa talking about he's to be blamed for a sack that happened in the game last week, and it should not be blamed on Collins? Did you guys see this?
So that was Ted Karras.
All right, Karras. Okay.
He said that the sack shouldn't go on La'el Collins because he snapped it early, which caused
the point I'm making here is there are a lot of people out there that ask this question. Okay, and we had Chris Collinsworth on, and we were unable to get into a lot of this detail about his company that he started with Jack Cassidy and some others, Pro Football Focus. Who is grading the players when they sit down to watch film? Because Pro Football Focus, for those of you that aren't aware, they grade out every pro player, regardless of position, every single week. And those were where you were getting some of those numbers a minute ago, right?
Right.
Okay. They grade out a player every single week. They do it at the highest levels of college football every single week. My understanding is they're starting to go into some of the high school kids who are big-time prospects, et cetera. Nonetheless, the point I'm making is who is sitting down in front of their computer screens and grading out, you name the player, okay? And I think this is sort of the point that Karras was making, is that, for the person who is doing that, would the tendency be automatically to blame, in this case, the Bengals' right tackle in Collins for a play? And maybe Collins does get blamed for that sack were it not for Karras coming out and saying it.
Yeah, I actually have a pretty good answer to this.
Okay.
Because I actually interviewed with them, believe it or not.
Okay.
Went deep into the interview process, asked those questions. they, after the game, evaluate the coaching portion of it as well, which kind of factors into the idea that they get the other details like the pass count, or like not the pass count, but the height count, whatever it is. That gets factored into that equation. And even so, I think they grade it based off of like the actual number that they send out, like this person got such and such grade. It's not based on necessarily the exact stat that they gave up. It's based off of their technique. It's based off of how quickly they got to the quarterback or whatever. It's like very detailed metrics. And they use the initial, they go out and when they try to hire these people to evaluate these players, they use that initial group, which is just fans, to grade the stats, like to grade like the numbers, like how many sacks he got, did he make the stop here, was he responsible for this or that. There's another person on the next level that kind of breaks down the film that says, okay, well, on this play, Aaron Donald clearly won the rep on this one, or he didn't win the rep, and then they grade it that way. And it kind of goes through a bunch of different levels all the way up into coaching. And those are numbers that they don't even show you. Those are numbers that the teams get.
Well, they're paying Pro Football Focus part of a service to provide those kinds of details. Yeah.
Right. So there's numbers that we don't even see that they're responsible for grading. And it goes as deep as into coaching. Because I was like, why don't we grade coaches? Like, that would be great for fans to overreact to a certain play being called. And they do. It's just behind the scenes. So there's just a lot of layers and levels of people involved in the grading process, which is why I use PFF so much, because at first I was a lot like the average fan who thinks, oh, it's just an average fan grading a player, and if they don't like a certain player, they're just going to get a terrible grade every time they play. It's not. There is a factor into it, but it's not everything. There is a whole nother level of work that's done behind the scenes, and the numbers. I don't use the grades. I use the numbers that PFF gives, like the percentages of win rates and things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it would be interesting to have somebody come in and break all that down for us. All right, fellas, I told you. He subscribes to the Thom Coughlin School of Time on the Wall, he being Marty Brennaman.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know the Thom Coughlin School of Timing, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. And so he's here early. He's making his appearance in the studio. We're going to get everything set up, so let's take a lengthy break here so we can get the chairs in, mics in, all that stuff. Cool?
Yep. No doubt.
And we're back with Marty Brennaman and your questions. And by the way, for those of you that are with us in the YouTube chat, if you guys have questions, please type them in. Marty Brennaman coming up next.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
turn when you're in pain. Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
I know one thing, ain't nobody does this better than us. Facts.
All right, welcome back to Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, and here he is. I mean, he's got the purple TCU
I had to wear this
on.
today.
I mean, looking good.
Thank you. I understand that you had a sweatshirt that you brought in today.
Yep.
And Paul, did you have a TCU thing on yesterday?
I did. I had a TCU hoodie on yesterday,
See,
Marty.
I mean, as I told the boys outside, if they were 1-6 right now, this would not be on.
Well, no doubt.
Because at the end of the day, admit it or not, you're all front runners.
Well, I'm not, but
Well, you
I
have
know
a vested
that you
interest
are. I definitely know that. Well, I can't say Paul is because Xavier basketball, they've stunk the last couple of years.
And he hung with them.
He hung with
God
them.
bless you for that.
And so, you know, that is what it is.
Yeah.
Your grandson, without a doubt, one of the all-time great front runners.
Maybe he would be the poster boy if you looked in the dictionary for the definition of front runner.
Yeah, and then there's Casey, who, Dad, I don't know. I know you watch the show. You're on the show every single week.
Casey, are you a subtle below the line front runner?
No, what Casey is the complete opposite of that.
Oh,
there was that line in the movie Apocalypse Now,
yes,
where the Marlon Brando character talked about the smell of war and the smell of napalm.
Correct.
The smell for Casey's house is that no matter who the Bengals play, they could be playing the 72 Miami Dolphins who never lost a game, and Casey would feel real good about the Bengals beating them.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the ultimate front runner.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
Well, I mean, he's a hardcore fan. All right, well, thanks for coming in today.
No problem.
I
It
know
worked
you're
out.
still doing a lot of work with the Reds Community Fund. I mean, you've raised.
Well, this is for the Hall of Fame.
Oh, the Hall of Fame. Okay,
Yeah,
but you have raised literally millions of dollars through the years, and all the incredible work that Charlie Frank does up there running the Reds Community
He's the best.
Fund. I mean, it's been amazing. So the Hall of Fame, you're going and speaking at a senior living home, right?
I am. It's only 7 minutes from here. It worked out perfectly. I got to be there at 1 o'clock, so I mean, it couldn't have been better, and it's better for me to be here than sitting at home doing this.
Well, especially with that tired
antiquated
whatever that is.
What are you
system
talking about?
You have set up where when you join us from your home, your home in North Carolina, it looks great. But I don't know what's going on in Cincinnati.
My place in North Carolina is nothing but a damn wall behind me. There's no creativity at all.
No, but whatever is
location.
Inside the wall is what's working, because it's that internet and it looks great in the background. You've got the window behind you,
okay,
and it's clear and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I understand.
Maybe we can help you a little bit here.
Yeah, well, maybe you can.
I had a guy came up to me the other day. And I think I might have been in UDF. I don't say it because they're our sponsor. And we got to talking for a minute. He recognized me, and he assumed for a second.
Yes.
And I'm curious if this happens to you a lot. He assumed that our family, the Brennaman family,
yeah,
that we have always been Ohioans. Do you get that a lot?
As a matter of fact, I don't.
Okay.
No. People, no, I do not get that. No.
But you are a native Virginian.
I am a native Virginian, and yes, I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia in 1942. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Stayed there. Which makes you 80 years young.
Sometimes it is young, sometimes it ain't. But yeah, and I stayed there and went to grade school, went to high school, and then left home when I was 18 to go to college at a small school in Virginia, Randolph-Macon College, which is north of Richmond on the way to Washington, D.C. on Route 1. And when I left home, I effectively left home. I mean, I came home in the summertime and worked every summer, and came home at Christmas and worked over Christmas holiday. But for all intents and purposes, not unlike a lot of kids, when you leave home and go to college, you're pretty much done. You're pretty much done unless something untoward occurs and you're forced to be back home for long lengths of time. But, stayed at Randolph-Macon for 2.5 years and then transferred to Carolina because I could not get in. When I got out of high school, my grades were not good enough. It was equally as tough then to get in as an out-of-state student as it is now. Mm-hmm. And I transferred, because transferring, amazingly, and I don't know if it's true of other schools, but you can transfer to Carolina if you've got a C average in college and you want to transfer. It's easy to transfer, and I did transfer. A lot of people don't, and I understand that, but I did, and I went there because I wanted to get a degree in communications, and I did that. Yeah.
One of the real knocks I've always had on broadcasting schools inside of major universities is not giving kids who come there wanting to be a play-by-play guy.
Correct.
The opportunity early on to do that, to find out, A, if they like it, B, are they any good at it, and before you know it, you've wasted a year or two, and you find out it's either one or the other, and now you've blown, Lord knows, in this day and age, how much money.
That's right.
Did Carolina give you a chance early on?
They did not. But I did get some. I worked at the campus radio station, which WUNC, which is one of the more respected college radio stations in the universe. But in terms of getting a chance to ply my trade, and I knew I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. I knew when I went to Chapel Hill that I did not want to be a guy that sat in front of a TV camera and got 3 minutes to do sports at 6 and 11 o'clock at night. I did not want to do that. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. I got a chance to work, albeit no play-by-play, but the guy who was the voice of the Tar Heels back then, a fellow by the name of Bill Curry, who was an incredible character. I mean, he was just he was legendary. He worked as a sports director at WSOC TV in Charlotte, did all the Carolina football and basketball games, and he gave me an opportunity in basketball to sit and do halftime stats on the Carolina network and comment every now and then on the game. And I knew that this is what I was going to do. and was forever grateful to Bill, who later left Charlotte and left Carolina and went to Pittsburgh. And I used to see him all the time when we'd go in to play the Pirates. He worked at KDKA. But I didn't get any play-by-play experience until I got out of school and got a job at a radio station in Salisbury, North Carolina.
Which is why I try to tell young people, and you've talked to tens of thousands of these young men and women through the years about, how'd you get started? What would you recommend? All those kinds of things. That's why it's amazing some of the stuff that these kids, the opportunities they're being given even in high school.
Incredible now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It really is.
So, I don't know at the end of the day, and I don't know if there's anybody on the planet that can answer this question. I don't know if that means that you have a better chance of doing it later in life. But the point is, guys like you and others from your generation, even my generation for sure, and maybe the next generation behind me, were a lot of guys that weren't getting a lot of opportunities even into their early 20s. And
as I look back on it, I wonder. You don't know. So it's easy to say, I want to be a play-by-play guy, and that's a general type of statement, because if someone had said to me back then, okay, fine, we've established what you want to do with your life as far as a vocation is concerned, is there a sport that you want to concentrate on? And I would not have come up with an answer for that question, and because I truly did not know. All I knew is I wanted to do play-by-play. My main interests were football and baseball and basketball. Now, maybe baseball was last, to be honest with you. And then, I'm off and running. And thank God I had some ability early and learned my craft as I went. There's no way I could have gone to a good-sized station that expected a certain level of talent and made it. But when you go to a small 1,000-watt radio station in the middle of the state of North Carolina, and they give you every conceivable opportunity to do everything you can physically do, because I did high school football and basketball, I did small college, Catawba College football and basketball, I did American Legion baseball, I did football for the black college there, Livingstone. I did everything. And if you have any ability, doing that much work is going to come out. And so they couldn't pay me enough to be good right out of the chute. Thank God for that, because I wasn't. But in 5 years, I got more experience. And when the time came that a job appealed to me and I could leave Salisbury and go to a bigger market, I was ready to do that.
We were talking before you got here, and Paul had brought up about, your work in basketball, and I started to touch a little bit upon the ABA and what that was like. Now, I think you have to be somebody even older than me to truly appreciate what the ABA was. But the bottom line is, when you were there, you saw 2 or 3 of the greatest players of all time on the team you were broadcasting for every single night.
Well, that's why. To help you, I was blessed to travel the road I traveled, because I was thrown together with some great teams or great players. And when I went to Virginia, when that franchise moved out of Washington, D.C., and moved into Virginia to become a regional franchise. They played in Norfolk, and they played in Hampton, they played in Roanoke, and they played in Richmond. Most of the games were played at a great facility back then called the Scope in downtown Norfolk. The first player whose greatness I came across paths was with Charlie Scott, the first black player ever to play at Carolina. The story is well known. Dean Smith recruited him right from under Lefty Driesell at Davidson, and Charlie came to Carolina and was just a sensational basketball player and carried that later on into the pros. Well, he was the big gun when I came to Virginia to do the Squire games in '71, and then a year later, a guy by the name of Julius Erving left the University of Massachusetts and came to Virginia, and I think Willie Sojourner was a teammate of his out of University of Utah, and he dubbed him the Doctor, shortened to Doc. And then a guy by the name of George Gervin out of Eastern Michigan came. So you're talking 3 players that are going to rank in anybody's top 100. In Julius's case and in Gervin's case, the top 50. Charlie would not be too far away from that if in fact he is. So I was very, very, very fortunate to watch these guys in the infancy of their NBA or ABA and later all three NBA careers. And it was just incredible to watch, especially watching Julius Erving play early.
You know, I want to stay on the basketball theme for a second because when you were at North Carolina or shortly before or shortly thereafter, and then as you moved along in your career, you got to be around guys who are some of the biggest names that maybe in the generation today they don't talk about them, and it's sad that they don't.
Right.
In Dean Smith.
Correct.
And Larry Brown.
Yeah.
Larry Brown was a player at North Carolina for Dean Smith. If I'm not mistaken, he was the first Olympian from North Carolina.
Yes.
I could be wrong on that.
No, I think you're right.
But I remember Mike Jaminski, the former great player at Duke, one of the top 5 players in the history of the Atlantic Coast Conference. At one point, he was number 1 in scoring and number 1 or 2 in rebounding. He said, without a doubt, greatest coach he ever had was Larry Brown. These two guys were very interesting guys. In Dean's case, you really got to know him quite well. What an amazing human being, not just a coach.
He was an amazing, incredible human being. People don't realize what a great person he was. He was never a guy to beat his own drum and pat himself on the back. The innovations that he brought to the game of college basketball were incredible, and they are timeless. They are still being done by teams today. And I did. In fact, when we came to Virginia, and I tell this story all the time, Doug Moe and Larry Brown were both members of the Virginia Squires. Both were players. Doug, of course, turned out to be a great NBA coach for thousands of years, it seemed like, with the Denver club and also the San Antonio team. And we went down to Chapel Hill. I mean, I made the comment to them one day that, my son would like to go to Coach Smith's basketball camp. And so they said, we'll take care of that. And so they came back later and said, Tom's all set to go. And I said, I called Coach Smith and thanked him and said, here's my address in Virginia Beach, send me. He said, there's no charge. And I said, Coach, I can't do that. I said, the fact that he can go is enough. He said, well, you got 2 choices. You can let him come and it's on us, or you cannot let him come because you want to pay and he ain't coming. And I said, well, okay. And I think he went 2 years.
Yeah.
And then but he was an enigma. If I can tell a story about how he could be. If you were a Carolina guy and you wanted to work, you were being considered to work for Jefferson Pilot, who had the rights at that time.
To the conference.
And the conference. And you wanted to, and they seriously were considering you. If you were a Carolina guy, he'd go to the mat for you. If you were a Duke guy or you were a Wake Forest guy or you were anybody else's guy besides Carolina, you had to prove to him that you were worthy of that job. And so the fact that I worked in the conference for 3 years later on was a slam dunk because Coach Smith endorsed me to the high heavens. However, there were times in which he and I crossed swords. I'll never forget, I did a game in 1986, I guess, in Chapel Hill. It was the top game of the year because it was Carolina was number 1, Clemson was number 2. Cliff Ellis coached at Clemson. He had Horace Grant and they had a great team. The weekend before, on a Sunday, Billy Packer and I did a game at the University of Maryland. This is late in the season now. But Dean had a deal where if you were an out-of-state kid and he wanted you to come to Carolina, he would promise you that at one point during your stay in Chapel Hill, he would schedule a game with a university reasonably close to where your family lived so they could come see you play. Carolina had a big man named Joe Wolf. And so
from Wisconsin.
Yes. So we went to I'm getting ahead of myself. Billy and I did a game at Maryland. And so it was on a Saturday night, late in the year, and we had to go to Chapel Hill on Sunday afternoon the next day for a game against Marquette. That was a connection with Joe Wolf because he was from Wisconsin. So we hooked a ride on the Carolina Charter out of out of Maryland into Raleigh-Durham, got in there late. The game was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and at the Smith Center. And Carolina was sluggish. They were overwhelming favorites, and they finally turned it on in the last 5 minutes and blew Marquette away. Well, with a half a minute to go in the game, the director came into my ear. They had a big deal called the Holly Farms Player of the Game. And so he said, "Who do you want as Holly Farm?" I said, "I don't care. We got stuff going on." I said, "Get back to me before you need." Well, I never heard back from him, and so the Holly Farms Player of the Game was J.R. Reed. He did this, he did that. The next weekend, I'm in Chapel Hill on Saturday to do the Clemson Carolina game, and Friday I go watch him practice. Watch Clemson practice, and then watch Carolina practice. At the end of the Carolina practice, this young lady, a student manager, one of the student managers came up to me and said, "Mr. Brennaman, Coach Smith would like to see you." So I said, "Well, this is like the audience with a pope,
Sure.
So I go downstairs and shake hands, and he says to me right out of cold turkey, he says, now I've known him for a long time. He said, "Marty," he said, "sometimes I give you people more credit for knowing something about this game than you do." I'm taken aback. I said, "What are you talking about, Coach?" He said, "Last week, you people gave J.R. Reed the Holly Farms Player of the Game." He said, "He had 4 rebounds in 36 minutes. He said, Joe Wolf did this, Kenny Smith did this. How in the world?" Now I'm a little bit hot now. I said, "Coach, with all due respect, let me explain something to you. I got more to worry about than the Holly Farms Player of the Game." And he said, "You don't realize what a big thing it is for my kids and for all the kids that play in the ACC to be singled out like that on an ACC telecast." I said, "Well, God bless them for it." But I said, "I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off trying to wrap this telecast." He said, very abruptly, "Okay," he said, "I've got to talk to Billy Packer. I'll talk to him about this later on in the week." I said, "You do that." That's the way he was. He was an enigma. He was an enigma in every aspect of his life.
Now, a guy you got to know later, we'll get to some baseball stuff here in a minute, but I think a lot of you are not familiar with this side of your career, and Paul even brought it up before you got here. The other guy you got to know,
I don't know where you're going with this.
There's nothing that's an enigma about this guy.
Look at the powers behind the throne over here.
I mean, this was a guy that, I love Dean Smith. But
now you're setting me up.
For me, no. But for me, this guy was my kind of guy.
Okay.
And you got to know this guy who couldn't be a more polar opposite to Dean Smith, and that is the General, Bobby Knight.
Oh, man. He was something.
He was unbelievable.
You went to his camp.
Yeah.
When I came here, he was a Reds fan. Hey, you talk about a front runner now.
No, there's no doubt.
Because later on, he got that like that with Tony La Russa when Cardinals were winning world championships every year. It seemed like. Yeah, thank God he was a Reds fan when I came to Cincinnati in '74, and he became a big fan of mine, and I became a big fan of his, and he wanted me to do back then, and I'm sure there are some older people that will remember this, but back then when ESPN had not become a major presence as far as televising college athletics, each of the better programs had their own statewide network,
right.
And all the games that weren't televised. This happened at Kentucky because I did Kentucky games for 2 years with this same type of package. Indiana had the same deal, and these were mostly non-conference games. But there were 10 or 12 games, and it was a nice package, and he wanted me to do those games. So I met with some people. I'll never forget, there used to be the Holiday Inn on 8th and Lynn Street. And I met with them over lunch one day, and they laid it all out for me, and they said, "Coach Knight really wants you to do this package." And as the conversation wore on, I realized that Bobby wanted me to come up there 2 or 3 times a week to watch practice in advance of a game. As you well know, there ain't no easy way to get to Bloomington, Indiana.
No.
And I said, "I can't do that. I'm not going to do that." I said, "I can do that program justice if I come up there like the day before they play, watch them play, spend the night, do the game, and bang, back to Cincinnati. Well, that wasn't good enough for him. And he was hotter than a match because I would not do the games. And I said, besides that, maybe even a bigger thing, because I also had to do the Sunday coaches show. Back then, they were big deals. You don't see them much anymore. And it would go all over the state. He had already walked off the set once. I think the guy's name was Chuck Marlowe. I think that was his name. It did the show, and he got mad one day. Bobby did a question that he asked him, and he walked off the set in the middle of the program. And I told these guys, I said, Coach Knight would do that one time with me, and that'd be it. We'd be done forever. So it didn't work out. Then came the Olympic team that he coached in 1984, I think it was. It played in Los Angeles.
Team.
Yes. It was it was a college team. It was not a pro team.
Oh, that's right.
It was but he had Charlie Scott, he had Patrick Ewing, he had the big kid
Wayman Tisdale,
at
Oklahoma,
preacher's son.
Yep.
John Koncak from SMU. These guys could play. So we were staying in San Diego playing the Padres, and they were training there. And they were a week before the Olympic Games. They were going to stay there for another 4 or 5 days in San Diego and then go up to L.A. and then play. And so Jim Ferguson was the Reds media relations director, and he was really tight with Bob.
Big IU guy.
Knew him way back when Bob was at Ohio State. So Jim calls me and he said, Bob wants us to come watch them practice. They're scrimmaging the Portland Trailblazer rookies. Jack Ramsey was coaching them tomorrow morning. And he said no media, nobody there but NBA scouts and the Olympic officials and the teams. Would you like to go? I said, would I? He said, Bob will meet us at a side entrance. It was San Diego Sports Arena. We go down there, and the whole way in, walking from there to the basketball court, I had to be lambasted by him about, now you're going to see what basketball is all about. That blah, blah, blah ACC crap that you did for 3 years. He said, well, pale by comparison to what he was a little bit flowery. We go in there and sit down, and they start scrimmaging, and there are NBA scouts from every team. And we are the only non-basketball people in that building. That's how tight a ship he ran. And it was the kind of thing that both he and Ramsey could stop play and instruct a kid about. Twice, Wayman Tisdale got beat on a pick and roll from the top of the circle. 2 times down the floor. Bob called timeout. He went out there. He said, no, son. I mean, I almost had to walk out of there. I was laughing so hard. He said, now, you played for a coach in Billy Tubbs that did not know how to spell the word defense. He said, if I see that one time, once the Olympic Games, you're going to be over there sitting by me. Now, do you understand? He said, yes, sir. John Koncak did something. John Koncak was a great player. Bobby kicked the ball into the second deck of the sports arena and ran him off the floor. He said, go into the dressing room. He said, you're done here today. I'm not going to look at this anymore. That night we had him on the radio, and he said Michael Jordan was the greatest athlete he'd ever coached. He said Wayman Tisdale was the greatest kid that he'd ever been associated with. Tisdale's dad was a Baptist minister, and he was eloquent in talking about his team. And, of course, they go up there and they win the national championship. But he was –
Gold medal.
I mean, the gold medal. I'm sorry, the gold medal. He was really incredible to be around and to talk basketball with. And I cherish the times that I spent with him because you're talking about 2 of the greatest of all time in Dean Smith and Bob Knight.
I think it's a shame, and we'll save this for another day. I just think it's such a shame in this day and age. You can't coach like that anymore.
No, you can't.
And you're not doing the kids of today. Although mom and dad feel like little Johnny, you can't handle that kind of thing, or little Susie, I totally disagree. I think you talk to professional athletes, especially in football and basketball, they want structure.
Right.
They want to know exactly where you stand. And if you get your ass jumped every now and again, or more than every now and again, it's okay.
And the other thing is, Tom, he graduated his kids.
No doubt. So did Dean.
When your parents allow you to commit to a certain institution, and I don't know whether that plays as strongly today as it did back then, but you're going to get a college degree. And when Bob Knight or Dean Smith said that to a parent in their home and recruiting the kid, they could count on the fact that unless something occurred, and everything went according to Hoyle, this kid was going to graduate with a degree, and they were two of the best at that.
All right, I want to get to some of the questions that we got from people online. And I'm going to start with this one since we're talking a little bit about basketball. Tim wants to know, Marty once told me, apparently you've met Tim.
We'll see.
He said, you once told me that basketball was easier to call than baseball. Why?
I never said that.
You never said that?
I mean, might have been drunk if I said it, but I don't believe. I'd have had to have been drunk if I said that. And I didn't do that very often. There's no way. I've often said publicly that the toughest sport of all to do is baseball.
Well, that's what he's saying.
Oh, he said,
yeah. He said basketball is easier than baseball.
Oh, absolutely.
So you weren't drunk and he wasn't drunk.
No, he's dead right.
Okay.
100%. I
You're
did
all
say
right,
that,
Tim.
and I've said that often. I think
you've been out of rehab a few years, but it's okay.
if there's a pure art form in play-by-play sports, that's not true, by the way.
I know that.
If there's a true art form in play-by-play sports, it would be baseball.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Josh wants to know.
Josh.
Who do you consider to be the best all time at calling games in any sport?
Well, let me say this. I think the best play-by-play announcer of every sport he did, and he did Oakland Raiders football, he did Golden State basketball, and he did Oakland Athletic baseball. All three were Bill King, the best. And if people don't believe me, go on YouTube or wherever you need to go to find examples of his play-by-play work. Bill's been dead now for a number of years. The best announcer at a given sport is Vin Scully in baseball. But Vin was also great in golf and whatever else he did. But as far as all-around ability and doing it at three major league sports, and Bill King was really something. He really was.
I would throw the name Dick Enberg at you on that.
Enberg, well, yeah. Although he did, but he did network stuff. He did Angels baseball, and in his latter years, he did San Diego Padres baseball. And he was doing the ACC with Al McGuire and Billy Packer when I worked in the conference for Jefferson Pilot. Spent a lot of time with them as our paths crossed. But I'm talking about working in three major leagues: the NBA, the MLB, and the NFL, and doing it as well or better than anybody else at the time they were doing some other team. Bill King was a guy.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. He was a guy, and we'll get to some other questions. He was the guy, if I'm not mistaken, that had one of the most legendary moments of all time.
I got it on tape.
You got it on tape.
You always speak in the NBA?
Yes.
Yes, I got it on tape.
And,
with an official?
Yes.
I got it.
Yes.
I got it.
And that was?
It was a little rough.
Well, I know. We don't have to use all the words, but.
It's a little rough.
This is thinking on your feet.
Huh?
This is thinking on your feet.
Who, me?
No, King, with this whole thing. So tell the story.
Well, I don't. It's been so long since I've heard it, but that's the one that stands out. It was in a regular NBA game, and there was a call that he felt was absolutely the worst call he's ever seen.
It went against the Golden State Warriors.
Had it not been against the Golden State Warriors, it would have made no difference. But he lost his mind, and he screamed at this guy. And all this is on the air. I mean, he just lost his composure, and it was eloquent. It was flowery. It was to the point. And how in the world he survived, I don't know. I'm not sure who the official was. I had a problem the same way when I did, although thank God there was no profanity involved. Eddie Middleton, who was an ABA official and then later went to the NBA, and he made a call against Charlie Scott one night at the Salt Palace in Utah. That was a shot at the buzzer, and if the shot goes, Virginia wins. And it was clear that Charlie had released a shot before the horn sounded, And Middleton waved it off. And so now the game's got to go to overtime, and Utah beats Virginia. And the horn sounded because the regulation was over. So we went to a commercial break, and I screamed at him and kept screaming and kept screaming. He finally came over before the commercial ended, and he said, I'm going to do the best favor I've ever done for you. And I said, what's that? He said, you open your mouth one more time, and you're going to be watching this game from outside on the street. I said, you can't throw me out. He said, try me and see if I can't. I didn't try him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Bill King thing, he's screaming at the official, profanity-laced.
Yeah, it
ends up going out over the air.
It did.
And once he realizes that it was on the air, and when I'm talking about quick on your feet, something to the extent, if I remember the story right, was he said, I want to apologize for a fan sitting right behind us in the stands.
That's
Something
correct.
along those lines.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
That's what he did. And he beat the rap.
That's right.
Because he was so quick on his feet.
That wouldn't happen now.
No.
Okay. Colin wants to know.
Yes, Colin.
This is a good question.
I'm sure it is.
Which manager did you most enjoy doing the pregame show with, and which manager was the toughest to do the pregame show with? That's a good question because you were down there for tens of thousands of interviews every single day.
Well, there would be two that I enjoyed the most, and that would be Sparky and it would be Pete. Because, and you've done enough of this to know, if you're doing an interview, if you're doing a regular show with a manager, and there are times, no matter how great the team is, when things are not going well, and there are days when you show up and you may say, hey, I don't have a whole lot to talk about. Yeah. All Pete would tell you is, he said, you ask me one question and I'll tell how long you need. And Sparky was the same way. Piniella was good. The toughest was John McNamara, who was one of my favorite people of all time. Mac passed away a number of years ago. He came in after the 78 season in a very controversial move by the club when they fired Sparky, and they brought John in to manage the club. And John had 2 strikes against him as far as I was concerned, and for no reason, because I didn't even know him. Sparky and I were very close, and McNamara came in, and over the years in which he managed the club, he and I became very, very good friends, very close friends. He was tough because he was a man of few words. He really did not have a whole lot to say, to the point where it was a struggle at times to get through the show with him, but we always managed to do it. But he was the toughest one because he was not he was not eloquent, he was not outgoing, but he was just a great person. But they were the guys.
Yeah, anybody that was ever around John McNamara, loved that guy.
Yeah, sweet man.
Trace Fowler, he's a boss, so we got to ask his question.
Okay.
I told him it was tired, but maybe you'll like it.
It probably is tired, but go ahead.
Most underrated city he had to travel to or work, and why? Underrated city.
Gosh. I don't know. Let me ask you your opinion about this question. Is this something that he's looking for? I mean, he's betting on. Okay.
No, I just think that we could ask him. We could bring him in. He's right around the
most
corner.
underrated city.
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, a lot of people will say, "Oh God, I hate going to Pittsburgh." But I mean, in actuality, okay, is that it?
Chalk that up. Underrated? No, I didn't.
Okay,
Pittsburgh's not.
Well,
I'll tell you an underrated. The one that people looked at me like I had 3 heads when they would ask a similar question. What are your favorite cities to go to? And inevitably, I would say Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And they would look at me like I had 3 heads. And I would say, obviously, you've never been there because you would not react that way. I love to go there. We stayed at the Pfister Hotel, which is
great
a national landmark.
Yep.
There was always something going on. They might have Polish Week. They might have China Week. Whatever the case, there was something going on in the city almost every week in the summertime.
Summerfest, big music festival thing every summer.
Huge. And I just I love the people. Love the golf courses too.
Yep.
But Milwaukee would have been a town. Now, and one of the places, now to carry that further, when I did college basketball working in the ACC, I worked with a guy named Mike Patrick, who I'm sure people remember from his days with ESPN. Mike was a great basketball play-by-play guy. And he would do half the schedule, and I'd do half the schedule. And one of the cities that I grew to request, and people thought I was stupid, was Clemson, South Carolina. I loved going to Clemson. I mean, they had had fish camps down there where the food was sensational. They had a legendary SID named Bob Bradley, and he was later replaced by a fellow by the name of Tim Beret. And so I would request going to Clemson to do games, but they would be a couple that would come to mind.
Yeah, and it's still a great place to go, Clemson. Interesting one here from Jim McCauley wants to know, do you have a biggest regret from your career?
No, I don't think so. If I had to go back and have the freedom, obviously you can't do this, but I mean, if I could change anything, I would not change. I don't think I'd change anything other than to try and do something that you've done amazingly well, and that is to spend more time with your kids. I would have tried to figure out a way, because it really got to the point where after I got here and established some type of reputation, it was hard for me to say no to anybody that would contact me and say, we want you to do our games. This was primarily in basketball. I would probably try to do less of that and spend more time with you and Dawn that I did when you all were growing up here in Cincinnati. But in terms of a vocation decision, I don't think I'd change a thing. I turned down a job when I was working in Salisbury. I turned down a job to do Davidson College basketball on WBT radio, which is a 50,000-watt radio station in Charlotte. And that was when Lefty coached Davidson.
Yep.
And they had great players there. They had Fred Hetzel. They had Dick Snyder. Both of them were great players. Snyder was an incredible NBA player. And they were in the top 5 every year. And I turned that job down. And people thought I was crazy because they had a sports director there by the name of Jim Thacker who did ACC basketball. Yep. And I knew Jim was going to be there for the rest of his life and that I would never be anything more than number 2. And so for that reason, I turned it down. And 4 or 5 months later, I got a chance to go to Virginia to do the Squires games.
Okay, this is a good one here. Jason Cummins wants to know. All-time Reds starting lineup.
Oh.
But you can only use 4 players from the Big Red Machine team.
Ooh, that's a good
question.
That's a great question.
Yes.
All right, well, let me tell you the 4 players I'd use first to make it easier.
Right.
I mean, obviously, Bench would be behind the
Yep.
plate. Morgan would be at second base. Yep. Pete would be at third. That's 3. And Davey would be at shortstop.
Okay.
No, I take that back.
I was going to say,
I take that back. So I'm down now to Perez.
Well,
I'd take Tony Perez.
And over Votto.
I would take Tony Perez.
Okay, so, all right. So if it's Perez at first, Morgan at second, Pete at third, Bench behind the plate.
Yep.
Shortstop, I'm assuming Barry Larkin.
Barry Larkin would be at shortstop.
Okay.
Correct.
Outfield?
So I have a left fielder and a right fielder.
And
correct?
a center fielder.
Oh, my God. I'd take Eric Davis in center.
Okay.
Are these guys I had to see or I had to be a part of, or just guys that I felt like off the
You're
Reds?
picking your best lineup.
Reds team.
From all the Reds teams you've announced.
That I had to be a part of.
Yes.
So I can't take Frank Robinson.
No.
Man, oh man.
I mean, where does is Junior in this mix?
Junior would be in right field.
Okay, Junior in right.
I need
Eric Davis in center. Tracy Jones in left. Probably not.
That would probably not work out.
Okay.
No. Left fielder.
What about Greg Vaughn?
He was only there for 1 year.
I know, but I'm saying.
You know what? The guys that I saw, yeah, I'd take him for 1 year because he had 46 home runs that year, and he put the team on his back in September. I think he had 16 home runs in September. Guys were scared to death of him because if he jumped you, which he would, if he didn't think you were playing up to the standards that he thought you should be playing at, he would get in your face in front of his teammates, and if you wanted to do something about it, he'd do that too, and they knew that. Besides that, he's one of my favorite Reds players of all time. So, yeah, I'd say that would be the lineup. Yeah, that's a good lineup.
Okay. Houday wants to know. Houday 26 wants to know. What was it like the day Joe Nuxall retired?
it was tough. You know, he and I had an incredible relationship. They just got better and better and better with every year that passed. And we went into that season knowing that it was going to be his last year. But we never, and he and I we were never the kind to show our emotions toward each other. We both understood how the other felt about yourself. And so we go through the whole season, and we don't even acknowledge it. And now we get to the last game of the season, and we do the game, still not a word. Go to the commercial when the last out is made, come back to do the post-game show, and I said on the radio, I said, I guess we have to talk about it. He said, yeah, I guess we do. And I started to talk, and I couldn't. I got too emotional. I couldn't talk about it. And he said to me on the air, he said, I guess you need some help, don't you, little buddy? Because that's what he used to call me. And I said, yeah. And so we got through it. And but it was very, very difficult. And the last time, I'll take it a step further. The last time, and I've got a picture in my house here, and I got a picture in North Carolina of the same picture. A picture of us at Kenwood Country Club, the last day that we were together ever, and we were fulfilling an opportunity to play golf with us, won by a couple of guys in an auction, and so it was in November, and Joe was not in good health. Joe was not strong enough to play 18 holes of golf. But he came, and you well know how the layout is. The parking lot is you have to drive past the clubhouse to the parking lot, and then you have to come back and then go over that little side road going down to where the carts are and the pro shop is. And so we get there, and Joe's got a van. He drove a van, and I said, why don't you let me go get the cart and come back and get your clubs and put them on. He was going to hit shots, and, you know, he was a great storyteller. He and Vin Scully, the two greatest storytellers I've ever been around. And so I did, and we go out and we play, and he did exactly what he said in the first 9 holes, but I could tell he was really getting tired. And so I said at the break, I said, why don't I just, take your clubs back to your van and you go back to Fairfield? He said, no. I told those guys I was going to be here for 18 holes, and I'm going to be. And so we get to the 14th tee box, and we were just sitting there, and he said to me, we really had a good time, didn't we? And I thought, oh, man. And I'm convinced that we never, like I said, we never talked about stuff like that. And I was convinced then, in retrospect, I look back on it, and I realized that he intuitively felt that that was the last time that we were ever going to see each other again. We finished that day. We said our goodbyes. I left on Saturday to go on the baseball cruise, which Amanda and I are going on next week. It'll be the 38th, and I've been on every one of them. And I don't know that it was intuition on my part, but I made sure that I had the necessary phone communication, because we were going to leave out of Los Angeles and go down what they call the Mexican Riviera, that I would have phone contact anywhere I was, whether I was in the middle of the Pacific, whatever the case might be. So we go off. We leave Saturday. This golf thing with Joe had occurred, I think, on a Monday or Tuesday. And I go to bed on Saturday night, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and my message light is on my phone. And I pick it up to check, and it was Rob Butcher, the Reds Media Relations Director, calling, and all he said was 911. And I was in a fog, half sleep. It did not even impact me. I went back to sleep, and at 7 o'clock my phone rings, and it's our good friend John Burns. And John is talking, he mentions Joe, and he said, and I don't know what he's talking about. And finally he said to me, you don't know, do you? And I said, I don't know what. He said, Joe died last night at 11 o'clock. And so I was on the phone all day that day in the middle of the Pacific talking to radio stations, TV stations, newspaper people. And I really go back, and I think that Joe knew that was going to be the last day. And I have a picture of he and I in both of my homes. It was an incredibly special relationship. It's hard for me to put into words the way we were as two guys that thought so highly of each other. And the first year I did the Reds games, it took 4 months before Joe finally would stop calling me Al.
Yeah, Al Michaels.
Yeah, and it would be into June, and something would happen. He'd say, "Well, Al," and he'd catch himself, and he'd feel so bad because he felt like he hurt my feelings. That's the way he was, and finally he got out of it. And I said, "Well, I hope to God he got out of it." We were together for 31 years. Sooner or later, Marty's got to supersede Al, and it finally worked out that way.
All right, Cincy Kid 14.
Yes.
What's the best aspect about living in Cincinnati?
That's hard. We don't have enough time.
Okay.
I mean, every opportunity I had to leave here and go somewhere else, and somewhere else included the Red Sox and the Yankees and the San Francisco Giants and the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox. I never could leave here. And I think it had more to do with the city than it had to do with the job. Nobody's loved Cincinnati more than I do today. The older I get, the more the cold weather just grates on me and wears me out, and I'm not looking forward to what's coming now beginning today.
Yeah.
But I made the decision to stay. I never regretted. The closest I ever came was going to the Red Sox, and at the end of the day, I said no to that. So there's no aspect of this town that I don't thoroughly love, and thank God of all the places I could have gone to do big league baseball, this was a town, because I think there are only 5 guys that have done Major League Baseball 40-plus years and did it with one team, and I'm proud of that because I cast my lot with the city of Cincinnati, and the city of Cincinnati did not disappoint me at all.
Let's see here. Don's in Ohio wants to know, I remember when your son Thom broke his leg while vacationing trying to surf or skimboard.
Yes, indeed.
Says Marty was not very happy.
Marty was not
He
happy.
was calling the game and said, I'm told, that he had serious words for his son even as a grown man. True or false?
That would be true.
Okay.
That would be accurate.
Yeah.
You hit a stump, didn't you?
Yeah. I didn't want to ask that question, but here we are.
You remember the doctor?
The doctor in what?
That took care of you with the leg.
Wait a minute, you talking about?
I'm talking about in Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm talking about the one when I broke it a few years ago, skimboarding in San Diego. You're talking about when I was in high school and broke my leg.
That's correct.
My femur.
Yes.
And that would be sled riding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I don't remember the doctor.
Yeah, okay. Now that you bring it up, what happened in San Diego, I was not happy at all with that.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
No. Yeah. I did wax rather eloquent on it.
I wasn't happy either.
I know you.
Trust me.
Yeah. That's stupid, really. Go ahead.
Do you think, this comes from Ken, do you think there will ever be a salary cap or at least more equitable revenue sharing to make things more fair in Major League Baseball?
I do not. I don't think you'll ever see it happen in our lifetime.
Okay.
I can't imagine a scenario that would create an opening for that to occur. That's why I maintained with all the years that have gone by and all the commissioners that have come and gone in every single sport there is, the greatest of them all, and there's no contest, was Pete Rozelle, because he had the foresight and the wisdom to realize how important that would be in Major League sports.
No doubt.
And we're talking about back in the 60s now is what we're talking about. He was the greatest.
One fan wanted to know why not Adam Dunn in left field.
Well, Adam Dunn had his problems defensively.
Yeah.
You know what, though? But quite honestly, you look at his offensive numbers, And I'm not nearly as critical of Adam Dunn as I was, but I think I've gotten a lot more mellow in terms of some people, and I was hard on Adam Dunn because of his defense. But, boy, you look at his offensive numbers as a Cincinnati Red and his on-base percentage as a Cincinnati. He would be – can you imagine what kind of money he would command today?
Yeah, I mean, he's the analytics poster child.
Without any question.
Yeah, home run, walks.
And one guy, Kyle Schwarber, I'm thrilled to death he's in the World Series because he's a great young man.
You know he went to Middletown?
Yeah.
He did, okay. Yeah, that's a joke. No, it's a joke because Reds fans used to get on my case.
Oh, that's correct.
Every time he came. So I started doing it just for them, so I just did it for
I like
them.
that. I like that. Just tweaked them a little bit.
Played football in
Nothing wrong
Middletown.
with that.
Was a linebacker. May not know that.
See, you had a little bit of me in you because I would do that with Christian Laettner.
What about him?
Well, I mean, he's the most hated person in the history of Kentucky sports, period.
Well,
Nobody's
no
even.
doubt.
And I did that game,
Yeah.
the Kentucky-Duke game, when he hit the shot that beat Duke. And every season, baseball season, I would figure out a way to mention his name. And they would predictably lose their friggin' minds. And I finally, after about 100 years of doing it, I finally say, look, step back and take a big, deep breath and realize it ain't going to go away. And he hit the shot, and should have been thrown out of the game because he stepped on the chest of the Timberlake kid, where he should have been thrown out right then. He wasn't, and he hit the shot, and he capped off a perfect day. He was perfect from the field.
Yep.
One of the great college basketball players of all time. He beat you. Get over it. But I'd say you did the same thing with that tweaking thing.
Oh, you got to do it. You got to do it.
Every now and then you got to.
And now they're doing it to me with Nick Castellanos.
I know
so
they
it
are.
Goes around, comes around.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
That's just point made.
Who, by the way, we pointed out that it's funny, and I mean, I don't want to take credit for it. I'm not going to take credit for it because you'd have to be superstitious to do that.
Yeah.
But it's funny. When we were planning this show launching, we thought it would be perfect to have as the very first guest on the show Nick Castellanos.
Right.
Right? So in August, Brandon Sejo and I contact him, and I end up having a lengthy back and forth with him, both talking on the phone and texting. He's like, I'd love to do it. Be crazy about doing it. I think everything that happened for both of us is just insanity in this world that we live in today. He said, I'd love to do it. I said, well, you think about it. And he calls me back on the phone. He said, you know what? And this was in August when they were just starting to kind of get it going.
Yeah.
They had fired Girardi, and this was mid-August. And he's like, I got a feeling our team is going to make the playoffs. And I don't want to create any distraction for anybody on my team that I play with. So whenever our season's over, I'll be the first guy on the show the next day. So now here they are. Can you believe they're in the World Series?
You going to follow up and try to get him?
I definitely. Because he said he'd do it. And he meant it. And I can tell him.
You know what? They loved living here.
Yeah.
His whole family did.
They did.
So I don't know why he would not do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was, look, he was a part of the whole Reds thing. And I don't think anybody in their right mind, no one in their right mind, thought the Reds had any chance in the world, even knowing he loved playing.
Correct.
That they were not going to sign him.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody begrudges the Reds for not signing him.
No, I don't think so.
You can get into the whole debate about all the players that they traded away, whether it was Winker. I was never a big Winker guy. Suarez was starting to do one of these. Sonny Gray, all this kind of stuff. Now, as you look at the Reds franchise now, and I said before you came in today, because there were a lot of questions to ask you about this, and this. I said, look, I'm not doing that because he's been with the Reds for a long, long time. I'm not putting somebody in a position to do that. I didn't do it when Dave Lapham was with us a couple weeks ago or Dan Horty's with us every week.
Right.
They're employed by the team. But when you look at the Reds right now and the franchise moving forward, what are your thoughts on the state of the franchise? Attendance is way down, way down. But that happens when you have a bad team. It'll come back around if they had a good team.
Sure.
But what are your thoughts about the state of the franchise?
Well, I think that, they made a decision, and I'm sure that they, meaning ownership and Nick Kroll and everybody else involved, that they were going to rebuild. Now, to form some understanding of the upset fans, it's the second time that they have, quote, rebuilt in the last 6 or 7 years, whatever the case might be. But they made the decision to unload big contracts and in return get high talent from other clubs in the process. And they did that. And they jumped, their farm system jumped from, I think it was 15th among all farm systems to 4th in all of Major League Baseball because of the influx of young talent. The fact of the matter is that I don't care how good you are or how good you are anticipated to be coming out of high school and coming out of college, it's still a roll of the dice. You never know. If these kids pan out, they're going to be fine. They're going to be good at a lot of different positions. They have, and I agree with the philosophy that Nick Kroll has, is we will draft and or trade for as many good young shortstops as we can, because that's the most athletic position on the field. You can put him anywhere, and they've done that. And so I don't think you can expect it to happen next season, but it better begin to show signs big time by 2024. If it doesn't, then every head in that organization should roll, because they have decided that our future is going to be with young talent. And they've gone out and they've gotten a whole bunch of good young talent. Now, I think you'll see some of these kids, pitchers, that will be given a big chance of making this club in Goodyear come spring training. But the position players, the number one guy is this kid, De La Cruz, a shortstop, who was at Dayton, and they moved him to Chattanooga. He never missed a beat, and he has torn up the fall instructional league out in Arizona. He's is just a gifted player. I would hope that they would not move him off that position because you never know what's going to happen. This kid is going to be a great player if he continues to progress as he has, and I think he's an example of what we can look forward to in a couple of years.
Before we're almost out of time, but Casey is just starting to really learn baseball. He's not a baseball guy, but he's been around Cincinnati forever. Price Hill guy.
Yeah.
Paul is a a Virginian, I guess, right?
Yeah, Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia.
Where?
Right outside D.C., Springfield.
Yeah.
And then we know the Dunce, Brandon Sejo, who's on his way over, LaSalle guy.
Certainly is.
And boy, I would not want to be a LaSalle Lancer this Friday night. Holy Moses. They are playing Winton Woods, a defending state.
That will not be a good outcome.
That is not a good matchup. Yeah. Fellas, anything you want to ask my dad before he gets out of here?
Brandon, anything over there?
Oh, we're going to go to me first?
Yeah,
you guys don't have anything?
The Dunce.
first.
We start with the Dunce.
You first.
Right.
Well, first off, Thom wouldn't let me. I was going to bring in a pack of Laura's Lean and have you sign it for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd have done that.
We'll do that next time.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
You've had a lot of big calls. What's maybe not your favorite one, but the most memorable one where it was like you're in the booth and you go, holy cow, that was an incredible moment that I just got to describe and call?
I don't know. I've never asked that question before. All I can tell you
that's
is
what I'm a hard-hitting journalist. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I know it. That was a good one too.
We're not sure really why he's here, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't. I'd like to say the Carlton Fisk home run, but I was sitting in the clubhouse at Fenway Park in Boston when that happened, waiting for the celebration that didn't occur until the next night. Other than the calls,
Well, you like the Jay Bruce call.
Well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's maybe my single favorite call. Yeah. And he homered in the ninth inning off for Houston.
Yep.
Tim Burdick, center
What about
field.
Junior? I think that's my favorite call from you, is knocking the door down to the 500.
The 500th home run was one of my favorites. Because I was never one to plan what I was going to say. I don't think you can do it justice if you do that. And I didn't do that. It was Father's Day, which really made it nice because Senior was there and all of his wife and kids, and but that was one of my favorite calls, and the 600th home run was okay, but it was before about 13 people in Miami, so it really didn't create the kind of stir that doing it in front of a standing room only crowd at Father's Day in St. Louis was for 500. Yeah, that was it.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm just interested, and you guys talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but how much different do you feel like the broadcasting industry is as a whole now than when you started, Marty? When you look at all these different opportunities that guys my age have or guys that are starting in this versus where you were, where, I don't want to say your generation started broadcasting, but you don't have the same opportunities when you were starting that you do now.
I think there are a lot of similarities, Paul. I think that the toughest thing to do is to get a job. Yeah. If you come out of college, I don't care what kind of experience you've had, unless you're just gifted and you stand out among everybody else in that graduating class among all the schools in the country, it's tough to get a job. If you get a job, you got to go wherever you. I tell young people, they come up to me and they say, "Can you give me some advice?" I say, "Well, yeah, let me ask you a question." They say, "What's that?" I said, "Are you in love?" And they're kind of taken aback. And a guy would say, "Well, what's that got to do with it?" I said, "It's got everything to do with it, because if you got a chance to go to Missoula, Montana, and get a broadcasting job, and they're not paying you hardly enough to live on, you can't be burdened by having a girl that you're in love with. You can be in love 2 or 3 years from now and get married when you're more established financially." And I think that's true today. You know, if your wife works, that's fine. I don't think it's really changed a whole lot in terms of entering the profession, other than the fact that it's the most competitive field that I think you can get into it, because there is certain glamour attached to it. I mean, nobody had a better job on earth than I did. I mean, doing all the stuff I did, traveling the country at somebody else's expense, associating with the people that I associated with. I don't think there's a better job to have. But it's really tough to make inroads and get the kind of job that you want to start with.
All right. I have one other question, because a few people have sort of asked the same type of thing, so I want to make sure we get this answer out of you. Your favorite golf course to play? You're a big golfer, Marty.
My favorite golf course I've ever played was Kings Barnes outside of St. Andrews in Scotland. But I've just come off of 2 months ago playing golf in Ireland. And, I mean, I played Old Head in Ireland. The beauty is overwhelming. There's a lighthouse on the end of a point. Ballybunion, Waterville, Adair Manor, which is where they're going to play the Ryder Cup in 2027, and then the Royal Dublin Golf Club and Portmarnock. For me, there are better golf courses in Ireland than there are in Scotland, from top to bottom. Really? The most famous golf course of all, of course, is St. Andrews. The old course in St. Andrews. But the courses in Ireland and the country I'm a big Irish fan because the people are great. The beauty is unparalleled, and the golfing is wonderful. But I would say that Kings Barnes, that was built by a couple of guys from Houston, Texas, outside of St. Andrews, is probably the finest golf course I've ever played.
All right.
Casey?
I got one question.
Yes.
Wow, you came up with something,
This
Casey.
is huge here.
I did.
Stop the bus.
He gave you all the time in the damn world
Stop
to come
the
up.
bus, as they say.
Stop that, I want to get off. That's right.
And
Not my brother. Go
has
ahead.
nothing to do with baseball or your career.
Okay.
It's got to do with your fondest memory of Thom. What is just something that you find that was so funny, or something very endearing that he did when he was a kid?
Let me tell you something. When he was just a young boy, and I don't think we'd been in Cincinnati very long. I don't know, maybe a year or so. And he would come down. His mother would bring him down to the ballpark, and normally he'd come with a friend. He wouldn't go as early as I would go. And then they would be their own, they'd supervise their own stay, and they would rarely ever do anything wrong. And he never did at the ballpark. He'd be in his seats, or he could come up to the radio booth, and his deportment was wonderful. I finish a game one night, and I go home, and I walk in the front door, and his mom, my wife Brenda, said, "Where's Thom?"
Oh, no.
You remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, "What do you mean, where's Thom?" She said, "He and whoever was with you, I don't know who you brought that night, they were supposed to ride home with you."
Uh-oh.
Well, now it's hotter than a match. I had to get back in the car and drive back downtown to Riverfront to get him and his buddy. Mm-hmm. And I was not happy. You remember that?
Yeah.
Thom was a good guy. Thom, I was blessed because I had 3 kids, and Thom and Dawn and my youngest Ashley, which I had very, very little, if any, problem with. And I think a lot of it had to do with the people they hung with. 'Cause I think you run with a bad crowd, you're going to get in trouble. And they did not do that. I'm sure there are a lot of things. In fact, this is not the proper venue to talk about things that occurred as Thom got older. And Thom went to college, and Thom worked at the beach. And but we did touch those bases at a recent gathering of guys that you went to high school with.
We did. Yes,
and
we did.
It made him a little bit nervous. But that would be better left for another day. But I'm proud of my son. He's such a better person than I will ever hope to be, and I mean that sincerely because of all he's gone through and the way he's dealt with it. And I'm proud to tell people my only son is named Thom Brennaman, and I'll always feel that way.
And I've got one last thing for you guys. This is just the cherry on top.
Cherry on top, presented by UDF.
Presented by UDF.
Big.
All right, here we go.
Not only did we break viewer count, we almost made it to 100 concurrent viewers,
Okay,
which
all right.
is awesome.
Yeah.
You're great, Marty. Thom, you're also great. You guys together, amazing.
Off the
Just
charts
a round
today.
of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Wait, where's
Thank you.
That's
Thank
from
you.
having him in here today.
We had a
He
good
is
time
taking
today.
Our show to a whole new
Rather
level.
good to see you, man. Wait a minute.
We should have got Tracy Jones in here with you. You two going
I
back
thought
and
about
forth,
it.
Tom.
We got to
man.
do that sometime.
We
Oh,
will
man.
do
That
sometime.
would be
We got to do
wild.
that sometime.
We'll do that sometime. And, look, Tracy and Dad, you guys, you do your thing. Brennaman and Jones on baseball. We got Tracy a couple days a week here. He
Yep.
does his thing here. It's a fun bit.
Been a good day today. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Love you.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Adios. See you tomorrow. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Thanks to Marty Brennaman. Great day.